So first I'm going to talk a little bit about the pose I did here. So if you look really closely, you'll see that it's not just static in any position. And I recommend you spend as much time as possible just turning it around, looking at it, sitting down, make sure the weight feels like it's set, it's balanced. You know, if I tilt this in any one direction, like this, it'll feel like the weight is off. So it's really useful at this point to get it balanced. And you can make minor changes later. You don't have to worry about getting it all perfect right now, but being able to do things like tilt the hips here, tilt the shoulders, and look at it from the top. There's all these angles that you don't think about normally when you're just drawing. So it'll really help you start to think about it in a lot of dimensions at once. So I'm pretty happy with it. I gave a little bend here and there, you'll notice, to the lower leg, just to simulate almost like an action line if you're doing a gesture drawing. So I could see the gesture of the whole pose. But that's just me. You don't obviously have to do that. Yeah, I'm pretty happy with it. Got the spine curving. I think it'll work out. So you want to check your fastening to the board here. If it's too loose, you will have a hard time making it stronger later. And if you're going to end up building a lot of heavy stuff up top, you know, sometimes you have to reinforce it with even more wire. But it really depends on how much weight you're going to get. And it's not too bad. You won't have a problem when you're sculpting. The only problem happens when you go to bake it. You may end up with some cracks on a few of the stress points. Once it's baked, it's hard, and this wire stays rigid inside and can cause little cracks. But you know, you can decide. These are all one-offs, so you don't have to bake it if you don't want to. But it's still good too. As long as you're not picking it up and moving it around all the time, it should survive even some minor cracks. Okay, so the first step to get this ready for putting on the muscles is to coat the entire structure with a thin layer of clay. And I like to do it as thin as possible just so it's not filled out and it leaves room for all the muscles. Again, the reason why I stuck most of this wire where the bone goes is because putting on the muscle is quite realistic. It becomes a study in anatomy. Every time you do it, you just get better and better at it. So it's always a fun part for me. So for this part, again, I like to keep a bit of it in my palm to warm it up while I'm going. And this is the firm clay, so you'll notice it may crumble a little bit when it's in its cold state, but that's still 100 times better than that soft crap that you get. So you'll have to just tolerate a little bit of the crumble when it's firm like this, but just trust me that it's way better. So, for doing muscles and things, you'll see I'll make somewhat of a tube or a snake like this and keep it in my hand. And then as I peel it away, I'll end up with these strips that are almost already in a muscle sort of shape. And they'll be used over and over again on the piece. But for now, I'm just warming it up, and I'm going to coat this whole thing here. So you notice there's air that gets trapped inside there. And it's really annoying at first, but the easiest way to get rid of it is just to warm it up, smush it over and over again, and just work your way out from one spot. What you don't want is a gap that creates like this shift, and you'll feel it if you hold on to one piece and you move it back and forth. You sort of feel like gap inside. That's what you don't want. It's not going to explode or anything like terracotta if there's air inside. It creates unnecessary gaps and weakens the structure. So this is probably the least exciting part. It'll take a while. So let's pause the video.
I want to pause.
Yeah. Guys, just real quick, another way to wrap it on is to flatten out a piece like this. You'll see, you'll get a feel for it after a while. So you can wrap it around like that, but again, you want to make sure you press all the air out. Just work your way up and down. And for the base, this one I plan to make the shoes pretty skinny. The ankles are going to be very skinny, so I really want to make sure I planted both feet. And I plan to fill a thin layer of clay at the bottom to sort of bring a platform up.
He's skipping.
So there it is, pretty well coated with the first layer. Now the bottom, I'm just going to put a little bit of clay down, but I'm not really going to worry about shaping the base. But in my head, I'm thinking it's going to be something either filling up the whole top or sort of going in an oval to match the shadow, if you want to think of it like that. Okay, so now this is going to be looking at some anatomy reference, doing the basic muscle structures, and blocking in a rough amount of clay for the hands, feet, and heads, or one head. So it doesn't really matter where you start once you have this. You can do torso out, or yeah, I don't really have an exact system for this, but it'll go back and forth quite a bit. Actually, a good place to start is the rib cage. It does hold quite a bit of muscle there surrounding it. It's probably one of the bigger masses that's just sort of filling in. So you can just start with a pretty big chunk. So keep in mind, it never comes straight out from the shoulders. You have a slope, and then you have ribs. So you can start doing your measurements from here. You can think about where the sternum ends and where the actual ribs would sit, and wrap them around both sides. They go all the way around the back. And then, of course, outlining the pelvis as well before you start wrapping any muscles around the torso is quite useful. See how it sort of fixes that proportion problem. When you just have that hourglass in your wireframe, it feels wrong because you're not really outlining a pelvis shape with that. But sticking in that part of the pelvic bone that sticks out, it'll really help sit the legs down and the side of your abs. You start roughing in like that. Still a little too thin there. I'm going to bulk it out a little bit more. Okay. Okay, so now I'm just going to finish bulking up around the ribs and go around the back. It might even be a little high there, so until you get the thighs in place, it's kind of hard. Until you get the thighs in place here, you won't really feel this point exactly. So I'm going to just keep going and worry about that later. So trying to do the muscles around the neck too is next to impossible without seating some sort of mass on the head. So this is a good point to rough in the mass for the skull. It doesn't have to be anything more than just a serious rough. So what I mean by that is no facial features, just the skull bone itself. Something like that. And then you'll be able to take it on and off later and deal with it that way. What you do want to do is make sure, another thing you can do is tilt that bar a little forward, it sort of forces you to move the skull forward on the shoulders. A big mistake a lot of people do is they seat the head straight above the shoulders, and it's, you know, anatomy study. People will know this already, but your chin is more in front of your chest if you're standing normally. So see how already that feels like it's got forward motion. Feels like the spine's in a good place, even up to the skull. Okay, let's do some arms. And then I'll be able to see the torso in relation to the size of the arms. Hopefully finalize some of the mass there. And none of this is final work by any means. This is all just getting the mass of clay on. But while you're doing it, you're studying how these muscles interact and getting the volume closer to what it actually should be. So I'm not doing every single muscle in one piece. I'm just thinking about the masses that are visible through the skin. But you can see how the way you pull it off lends to the construction in a nice way. If you taper the ends as you're pulling it, it'll look more like a piece of muscle. And it's not that we're going to wrap a piece of skin around, but it's just getting the volume right. You got to be careful doing a female like this skinny, because she'll end up looking like a roided out muscle builder. But you can always trim it down later. You know, getting this roughed in is not, it's not bad if you end up a little bit bulky. So again, depending on the position of the shoulder, you'll either see the shoulder blade or you won't, but you still want to sort of lay down a big mass on the back of your armature. It'll really help from the top and the side. You'll notice if you don't have something back here at the top, sort of in that shape, it'll feel really like it's caved in. So yeah, I'm trying really hard not to bulk up her shoulders too much. So now I'm looking at the thickness of the rib cage versus the abs. It's a little too skinny right now. So I'm taking the bend of the back into consideration. That looks better. So I'm really looking at this line, this bump where the ribs show through the skin if you're not, not completely anorexic, but you know what I mean. feels better. Okay, now I'm going to go over them a little bit. This isn't for final piece again, but this is more for measurements. I want to be able to see these distances. So I'm going to score over these muscles sort of in the shape of the muscle itself to outline them sort of as if I was drawing the outline of the muscle. This part you'll notice will start to spin. You got to be careful pushing too hard. It's loose clay when it's warm. Give her a bull neck, so I'm not going to exaggerate her traps too much here. But if you just did a peg coming off the shoulders, it's going to look weird. So you have to taper it up somewhere there. And even if you're not doing a human, you know, the muscles wrap the same way. You're still going to have to adapt to whatever skeleton you're using. But it's always good to study. See, having that skeleton posed makes all the difference. Feels too long. Okay, I'm just gonna work my way down one of the sides to get you guys the idea. Then I'll come around and we'll just keep working. Okay, so hand, again, I'm just going to do a rough hand. This is a placeholder to get the amount of clay in place. So I'm just doing what we did in the other class, only a quarter the size. A little mitt. See if it feels the right size or not. What you can do is, if you want to do some real measurements with the head height and stuff, you can draw it down on paper and then model out the rough piece of clay and the rough shape, and then you'll have almost equal volumes. But you'll probably end up having to take them both off anyway, so I don't waste too much time on it at this point. But it is useful to see if your forearm's the right length or not. Yep, I'm gonna have to clip it. So you see where I measured? It's right in the middle of the hand again. I don't know how I keep doing that, but whatever. That's why I leave it a straight wire at the end, because I'm almost positive I'm gonna clip it off now. So unless you're gonna put something in the hand, like a heavy weapon, you really don't need the wire to go into the palm. But if you are, by all means, bend it and attach whatever you're going to stick in the hand with the thin wire through the clay. I'll come back to that. I want to work down torso and leg here. So yeah, some of this clay, it'll come off, you'll bump it, just fix it. Now the legs, you may want to mark out the knee before you start wrapping the quads. It just helps get your placement. So I'm constantly working my way up and down the chain of muscles just to feel the relationship, try to get the major silhouette in there, but it all ties into itself, so you can't really finish one area without going back and looking at the rest. So yeah, from the side and back, you obviously need these lines here to get the right dimensions. Looks pretty good. So again, this part will want to twist around the wire. You just have to be careful not to push too hard. You want to give it, hold on to the hips and then just get your piece almost in the right shape before you go squishing it on. Otherwise you'll just press it right through. Come too low at this knee here. It's okay though. The front should be a little bit lower. I mean, well, when it tapers down. Oh, you'll see. So I'm going to keep it about at this roughness until I get the whole body masked out. I'm just figuring it out as I go. It's always different. You learn something new every pose you try. Yep, that's about where I want it for now. So I'm going to keep going and do the other side, but I think we'll stop the tape there for now. This sort of completes this phase.